Okay, let's just throw this out there. What if, for a huge number of people, freedom isn't about following the rules at all? What if it's actually about having the power to break them? Today, we're going to dive into some really fascinating data that completely flips the script on how we look at power, freedom, and control. And it all kicks off with one very common, and as we'll see, very flawed assumption.
So let's start with a belief that's basically the bedrock of, well, almost everything. We're talking corporate governance, social policy, you name it. It's an idea that feels so solid, so logical. It's one of those things you just don't even think to question.
And there it is. This is the big one. The core assumption is basically this. If people are following the rules, then the system must be working, right? And if the system's working, everyone must feel free. It's this simple equation. Order equals a healthy, free society. And believe me, tons of organizations from huge companies all the way up to governments use this as their main yardstick for success.
But this is where it gets really interesting. What happens when one single piece of data pops up that just doesn't fit the model? A tiny little anomaly. You know, it's like that loose thread on a sweater. You give it a little pull and suddenly the whole thing starts to unravel. That's what we're looking at here.
And that little thread brings us to our central clue. We're talking about a signal hidden deep inside a bunch of global data that points to a completely different, almost radical way of understanding what freedom even is.
This is it. This one number changes the entire story. I know it might not look like much, but trust me, this single correlation is the key that unlocks a huge gap in how we predict and understand what actually motivates people.
So what in the world does this number actually mean? Okay, so in a massive study, we're talking 71 countries here, researchers found this really specific link. The more a person's worldview is geared towards power, self-assertion, and individual will, some researchers call this the red mindset, well, the more likely they are to strongly agree that real freedom is fighting for what I believe in. It's a direct, measurable link between a person's psychological makeup and how they define freedom.
And check this out, because this is where it gets really nuanced. This isn't just about wanting to dominate other people for the fun of it. Look at that strong negative number next to dominate others. People with this red mindset actually strongly disagree with that idea. No. For them, freedom is all about being independent, being self-sufficient, living without a bunch of restrictive rules, and yeah, fighting for what they believe in.
Okay, so this is the key takeaway. For someone operating from this power-focused worldview, the proof of freedom isn't whether you're following the procedures. Not at all. It's about whether you have the power to act on your own will. Asserting yourself is what proves you're free, not complying with the rules.
All right, so let's zoom out for a second. That red signal we just uncovered, turns out it's not an anomaly. It's actually a clue to a much bigger, universal pattern. It seems like every major worldview has its own hidden code, its own secret definition for what freedom really truly means.
Just take a look at this. For someone with a purple or tribal worldview, freedom is all about belonging to your group. For the blue or traditional worldview, freedom is doing your duty and following the rules. Hey, that's our original assumption right there. Then you get to orange, a more modern, strategic worldview, and freedom becomes about achieving your goals, about being effective. You see? Each one of these mindsets is looking at freedom through a completely different lens. It's like they're all speaking different languages about the same word.
And this is where it gets really serious. Because what happens when a system, let's say a big company or even a government, only listens to one of those languages? What happens when it tries to force a one-size-fits-all approach, assuming that everyone sees freedom as just following the rules?
Well, according to the researchers in this field, this is an incredibly common and critical mistake. So many systems are built on that flawed assumption we started with, and in doing so, they completely miss the mark on how different groups of people are actually experiencing them.
And this kicks off a totally predictable downward spiral. It goes like this. First, the system demands compliance. This makes anyone with that red, power-focused mindset feel trapped, like their autonomy is being stripped away. So what do? They resist. But the system sees this resistance and just misreads it as bad behavior or simple rule breaking. So it doubles down and imposes even more rules. You see the problem? It just makes things worse and worse until the system's own metrics for success are totally meaningless.
And that right there, that's the gap where all progress just grinds to a halt. You can't get independent, driven people to coordinate and work together if your system is actively punishing the very thing that makes them feel free and motivated in the first place. It really is like trying to build a bridge while you're tearing up the foundation on the far side. It's never going to work.
Okay, so if these hidden psychological dynamics are so complex and the stakes are obviously so high, how is any leader supposed to navigate all this? Well, this is where some really cool new tools come into the picture. Tools that let us finally see these invisible forces at play.
So one of the most exciting new approaches is built on a really simple idea. What if you could dig into incredibly complex data just by asking questions in plain English? You wouldn't need to be a data scientist. You could literally just talk to the data and get answers. That's the promise of these new AI-powered tools.
And this right here is a perfect example of a tool built on that exact principle. It's designed to map out that whole complex mess of values, fears, and trust inside an organization. It basically creates a live, real-time map of a company's psychological health. And suddenly, all those invisible dynamics, they become visible.
And with an interface like this, you can probe that incredibly complex model with just a simple command. You can literally just ask it, in plain English, to show you the exact patterns we've been digging into this whole time.
And boom, just like that, the AI visualizes the data for you, instantly. And it confirms the pattern we saw at the beginning, that positive link to fighting for your beliefs and being independent, and that strong negative link to crew domination. It takes this super complex, hidden dynamic and makes it visible, makes it actionable, and you didn't have to write a single line of code.
So all of this brings us to a really huge final question. If we actually make the shift, if we stop just measuring whether people are following the rules and start trying to understand what actually makes different people feel genuinely free and powerful, what has to change? What old systems, what old metrics, what old leadership models just break when we finally start measuring what truly matters?